Well, welcome everybody to our webinar, How to Optimize the GIS Workflows with FME.
Muted.
Mark Stokes, and with me is my colleague Steve McCabe.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone.
I'm the support lead here at Save Software, and Steve is one of our database gurus and FME server gurus and all-round generalist, actually. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's pretty good summary.
Okay.
What I do.
So, what are we going to do today? We're going to be looking at FME. We're looking at a couple of new things in FME 2016 and our upcoming release 2016.1. And we're going to be talking about a few sort of generalized topics, attribute management in FME, data validation, and also some work around a new way of writing your data out. Who are we at Save Software? For those of you that aren't familiar with us, we're here in Metro Vancouver in Canada. We're the manufacturers of the FME products. So we have the FME desktop product and the FME server product. So we're going to be touching on both of those today. And if you're not familiar with FME and you've joined us, you can go to our webpage. There's a Getting Started with FME page there that will help you get familiar with what our core products do. So just a summary of what our products do. Well, that's our role in life is to connect to a wide variety of different data formats and places where you can reach data. So that could be anything from more traditional use of FME, which is around CAD and GIS, and I'd say that's going to be our focus for today, around that sort of core product area, CAD, GIS, and GIS-related databases. We also work with databases, spatial and non-spatial, cloud connections to ArcGIS Online, WFS, and other OGC tools, and a whole bunch of cloud databases as well, and other data structures, raster, point of cloud, and so on. And the FME server product takes all that connectivity and data transformation tools and allows you to automate those. And we're going to be touching, Steve is going to be touching on that towards the end of today's presentation. So more specifically about what we're going to be covering today, we're going to be looking at managing your attributes with a new tool that's in FME 2016 called the AttributeManager. We're going to be looking at how to validate those attributes that you're managing with a new tool in FME called the AttributeValidator. There's a pattern there, isn't there?
Yes.
Something. And then how to distribute those validation reports. So we're going to be looking at a new way of writing out data using a thing called the FeatureWriter. And then we're also going to talk about how that overall process could be automated as well. So quite a lot of stuff to cover today. So let's start off with managing attributes. So well, let's first of all have a look at a workflow in FME and see what that might look like. So I'm going to generate in FME Workbench in our upcoming release 2016.1. So I'm just going to read a CSV file. I've configured it so that we're going to pick out the coordinate pair here. And so we're going to create some point data around the Vancouver area. And I'm going to write out a CSV file. And on the way, I want to restructure it. So that's what happens when FME generates a workflow from scratch. We get a very simple workflow, CSV in, CSV out. We can change the name of the output data if we want. So that'll be the name of the CSV file that we write out. Okay, and now I want to do something to the attribution that I'm going to write out here. And this is where the Attribute Manager can come in. And so we can just add that to our list here. And so we can now start to play around with some of the attributes. So if I've already created point data out of the lat long, I might want to remove those, so I can just click here and say remove that and remove that. So that's a good way to get rid of attributes in your list. We can add new functions in here, so we could say create a simple sum using something like the arithmetic editor. Take the sum of power and quality or something like that, just to make something simple. And a whole bunch of other tools that we might use to just manipulate our attributes. We have a bunch of other tools, which we'll probably touch on a little later in the webinar as we go, using a text editor for things like concatenation, conditional values, so that you can set a value based on a whole series of conditions. So we'll have a look at some examples of that. So that's a very simple workflow that we can put together in FME. And if we set the manual mode here, what we can do is those attributes that have we've manipulated in the Attribute Manager will riffle through to the output, and we don't really need to worry too much about what the output's going to look like. So the Attribute Manager and this mode that we added in our last release, the automatic versus manual mode, are very closely aligned. So as you handle your attributes in the workflow, that is just automatically reflected on the writer as well. Okay.
Save yourself some transformers there too.
And save ourselves a lot of transformers, and we'll look at which ones we're saving. So, so why another attribute handling transformer? Well, we do already have quite a few in FME. On the right-hand side are the potentially doomed transformers. I will say that we haven't actually removed any or deprecated any of these yet, and it's possible we never will, but we are consolidating a lot of these tools under one umbrella, which is the Attribute Manager. So the goal is to consolidate a whole bunch of these attribute management transformers. So what can this tool do? It can create, rename, copy attributes, remove attributes, set new attribute values, so we've seen all of that already. One nice thing in there is the ability to reorder attributes in your workflow. So if you have a lot of attributes and there's a few that you use a lot, you can shuffle those up to the top so that they're easier to access. And then one thing that we've added to the Attribute Manager, and actually also the Attribute Creator if you're already using some of these tools, is the ability to create an attribute and then in the subsequent calculation reuse that attribute lower down. So that was a bit of a bugbear for a lot of people using some of these tools. So that's a good addition to the Attribute Manager. So the Attribute Manager creates an opportunity for a more focused and simplified attribute management workflow. And let's have a look at that in kind of more of a realistic or a larger kind of workflow. So I've got, let's bring up the FME desktop again, and I'll just find this guy here. And so this is the workflow that we're going to be using today in many of the examples. So we're going to be sort of adding to this particular workflow as we go today. So what we're doing is we're reading some CAD data that's come down to us from the City of Vancouver Open Data website. That's a simple AutoCAD file, so we can have a look at that in the free viewer, the AutoCAD free viewer. So that's what that data looks like. Zoom in a little bit there. So we've got just thinned out some of the data. So it's water mains, hydrants, and valves on this particular data set. So pretty straightforward data. We're translating that, doing a little bit of simple transformation there, and then writing that out to a geodatabase. And that geodatabase is based on a data model I downloaded from the Esri site, which is the utilities site data model, and using a template file for that so that we can create that geodatabase with all the subtypes and domains. Okay, so that's the kind of the data we're going to be working with and the results that we're putting out there. So this is very typical of a CAD to GIS workflow where some of the attributes aren't going to line up and maybe some of the attributes aren't even defined. And so the Attribute Manager is a good tool for having a look at the state of all your attributes as they come in, and then allows us to set some of the attributes as they go out. Here we can see I've set up an attribute that is a concatenation, so I'm using the text editor to concatenate a bunch of values together to make that location description. I'm using a conditional test here to set the diameter. So on the AutoCAD side, we just have labels, small, medium, and large, and we're mapping those to a diameter domain that needs to go into the geodatabase that's already set in there. Got another one there for the ancillary roles. Forget what I was actually doing in there. Oh yeah, if it's closed, yes or no, we can set it to a Boolean value, so that's what we're doing there, and so on. And of course, down here, we can also just do a simple function, which is a count, so I'm setting the facility ID. So just some very simple kind of attribute manipulation tools. I think Steve would say that if you were going to get into a bigger workflow and a more sophisticated workflow, you might choose to use the schema mapper. Is that right?
That's right. I'm a schema mapper fan.
You like that. So it depends on the kind of workflow that you're working with, whether you might use the schema mapper, which basically takes these rules that we're defining here and externalizes them in a spreadsheet. So that is an option for people who want to have a more sophisticated kind of workflow. And if we run this guy, we can see we're prompting for the destination geodatabase, the source dataset, and the template file, which is the Esri XML workspace document, which defines the schema for that particular workflow. And we'll create a geodatabase out of that.
I will say the Attribute Manager does go a long way to kind of consolidating why I like the schema mapper, right? So
that's right.
You know, just one place to go.
That's exactly right. Okay, so that's attribute management. So we can take an input data set, manipulate the attributes so that they're aligned with our destination data model. But the next step would be to possibly validate that data. So what will that look like? So why would we want to do Attribute Validator? Well, all technology is really an amplifier. It's not a solution in its own right, so you have to add it as part of the process. And in the context of FME, one of the ways that you could think of that as being an amplifier is if you take a bunch of data, we can write out to 350 plus formats. So if you have some poor quality data and you spew that data out to 350 data sets, then really what you've amplified is the data issue that you have, which is the poor quality data. If you do some data validation and clean up your single source of truth, which is where Steve resides in our organization looking after these databases that are the single source of truth, then what you can do is you can distribute good quality data, and you've amplified the benefits of having a single source of truth, which is good quality data. So data validation is the key to many of the workflows, and actually we have a good series of webinars from different users who have used FME for data quality. And at the end of this PowerPoint slide deck, which we will be distributing after this webinar, there are a whole bunch of references to many of those data validation workflows and webinars and examples that different people have given. For data validation, there are many standards out there. There's an ISO standard on geographic information data quality. Many of these standards really just don't talk about what you have to validate, but more about how you should report the results of that validation. Typical of the ISO standard is the discussion about what is valid data. So it might just be a Boolean test. If something fails the validation, then the whole data set fails the validation. Or it might be a percentage failure test. So if only 2% of the data fails the tests, then overall the data set is considered to be okay and will continue with the output. Or it might just be a simple count test. Yeah, if more than 10 features fail the test, then we'll consider that data set to have failed the test. So that's kind of really what the ISO standards talk about. There's this lovely document there, the international standard, ISO 19157. So if anybody is an insomniac, that's a really good way of getting you sleep, is to peel open that 100-page document and plow through that.
Yeah, and it's not cheap either.
It's not cheap either. It's a couple of €100. We did buy it the other day. It's a consolidation of a bunch of other ISO standards in the 1900 series that they brought together into a single standard. So of course there are other standards out there, quite a few CAD standards, and really your data model may also be a standard. So that's the example that we're going to be using today, is the data model. That's the Esri utilities data model that we downloaded. We're going to use that as the sort of signature of data quality. So if we load data into the database, we need to make sure we're setting the correct domain values and so on. And again, in the past, we've had a lot of transformation tools in FME that people have used for data validation. That's sort of a list of some of them that people have used for data quality validation. And what we're trying to do here is bring under one umbrella, which is always a goal of mine, is to reduce the number of transformers that we have in our product. And we're trying to bring together under one roof many of the tools that you might use for typical attribute validation, and hopefully say goodbye to bad data. So the goal here of adding this new transformer was to simplify your validation workflows and just to be in general more confident about the data that you're loading into your destination data set. So for the attribute validation that we can do in FME, so here's some of the things that we're looking for. We can test for the attribute type. Is it an integer, float, char? We also can test for whether it's a valid XML or JSON document. So that's an interesting thing. Many of these emerging, or not so emerging, I guess, NoSQL or schemaless databases use XML or JSON blobs to store the data. And so before you load that in, you would want to make sure that it is actually a valid XML or a JSON snippet. So that's one thing you can do there. Is it in a list? So that's in a list or in a range, good for domain validation. You can test for regular expressions. I'll have a look at that. But here in the example, we've got one there. Do the first 3 characters of this code prefix have the letters A, B, C, or D, and if they don't, then we'll reject it. Is it a unique value? So we can test for uniqueness, not null, and a few other things. Well, once you've done the data validation, the key thing is to be able to report it out. And so the way that FME reports out the validation is with a couple of attributes that are added to every feature if they fail a validation test. So there's a kind of a summary attribute, which is really just the first validation message. So a single feature might fail more than one validation test because more than one attribute might fail a test, or even one attribute might fail more than one test. So the first message is just put on this summary message here. And then we have a list data structure that summarizes all of the messages there. And at the bottom there, this is what it looks like. So it's a very descriptive kind of message that we put out. So in this case, the attribute code prefix with the value ABE failed. The regular expression test, is it one of the first 3 characters of A, B, or C, or D, in which case it wasn't, it's an E, and so on. So in this case here, we have a single feature that's failed 3 tests within the attribute validator. The code prefix, number of measures, and the code prefix has also failed an in test because these are the actual valid prefixes at the bottom right here. Okay, so let's have a look at what that might look like in an FME workflow. So just going to open that workspace, an example workspace. And so this is a fairly straightforward validation test that we've got here. So again, I'm reading that same CSV file that we were looking at earlier on. And here's my attribute validator. At the bottom here is a summary of the tests that we're doing just to document those. So these are those tests here. Is it in range? The range ones are interesting. They use this kind of a square and curved bracket parentheses. But if you do a range test, you can say, is there no lower range? Is it greater than or equal to, and so on. So range values are easy to do. We can see we've got a data type here, checking that it's a valid JSON snippet in this data set. And then if we run that, we'll get a series of reports. So actually, most of this workspace is around the style of report that we want to generate for this particular workflow. And so I've produced, this workflow is a little more complicated than usual because I've created 3 different reports that people might want to look at. So I've just put together a simple validation report. And so what would that look like? We can just open that here, if I can find my browser. Bring that up in old sturdy Excel. So this is just a very straightforward validation report. Every feature that failed that validation test is output. Some features fail more than one test. So this is that feature here. So it's failed the three different tests. So those are those outputs we've got there. We could produce more of a summary report, which would be more along the lines of what you would do if you want to meet some of the ISO standard criteria for reporting out. So again, we could have a look at that. This is the summary report we've got here. So that's very simple. These are the different attributes that have failed a test, the number that failed, and the percentage of failure. So we've got a very simple report there telling us what is bad about that particular data set. And then the final one, which after we had produced this transformer, somebody asked for, which is more of a kind of a pivot report and a little bit more sophisticated. So that's this report here. And so for each of the features that failed a test, what this particular user wanted to see was the specific error message. So what we have is the actual attribute field with the attribute values in it, and then if that attribute fails a test, the actual error message that's associated with that. And so that's for each of these different messages. So there's the code prefix error message there. So that's the structure of that particular report. And I should maybe add that all these workspaces will be posted up there after this webinar, so that we can all have a look at them later on. Okay. All right. Well, let's maybe while we're still looking at validation reports, let's go back and look at our other workflow that we're doing there with the CAD to GIS and see how that might look in a validation scenario. So this is, again, that same workflow we were looking at earlier on, reading in some CAD information, doing our transformation with the Attribute Manager, and I've added here a new panel that is the attribute validation tests that we're writing out, different validation tests that we want to do on this particular data set, and then down at the bottom here, we're pushing that out to, in this case, I'm writing it out to a GeoPackage. I don't really know why I'm doing that, but anyway, that's going out. And again, if we ran this thing quickly, which I'm not going to do, but we should be able to find that GeoPackage and view it in the data inspector, which I've got somewhere floating around. Okay, let's bring that up again. Whoops.
Almost.
I'm almost there. On the wrong screen. Here we go. So that's that GIA package that I've put out, and so we get a graphic of the feature that's in error and the actual error message for each of those features that are in error. So we got something wrong with the diameter of these pipelines that have been set. Okay, so that's that workflow simply put together and ready to go. So just in summary there, we're doing the validation. Anything that fails that validation, we're sending down through this new tool here, which is the junction. So we're gathering all those connectors together at a junction, sending those through an output. Now, Steve doesn't particularly like that approach, so in a minute, Steve is going to start talking about, well, what would happen if I want to email myself that validation report after, or email it to a friend after we've run this test. So that's going to be the next phase of our webinar here. So I think we'll just take a pause before we jump into that and have a look at any questions that might have cropped up. Have you been watching some of the questions? It looks like there's been a stream of them going past. I haven't been able to track them.
Yeah, it looked pretty busy. But what about regex in 2016? Do we know anything about regex in 2016?
Well, I know that in 2016 we've consolidated all the regex tools so that at least we are consistent with the regex throughout FME. We have about 2 or 3 different regular expression engines.
What I like about the regex is that actually I can test it right inside a lot of these transformers now. That's a big one.
Yeah, and I can't show that off the cuff, but I think that's what Mike is asking there is, do we have a tool to check or validate the regex expression? And so, yeah, there is a regex editor in FME now, and so when you create a regular expression, you can certainly validate that with a little test expression. I'm not quite sure whether that's the actual question that Mike's asking there. Will the new attribute validator provide a separate spreadsheet report that lists all the records that need to be reviewed? Well, that's kind of what I was doing there as I was outputting those reports. And so you do need a little bit of transformation tools to get the report out in the way that you would like to see it, because it is kind of a bit of a descriptive report. So you do need to play around with the results a little bit. And it's possible we might change the structure of that report slightly as time goes by.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we can come back to some of the other questions a little later. So let's move forward. I think we're going to transfer control of the presentation over to Steve. And so Steve is going to move forward with this idea of taking the results of a workflow, which is in this case a simple validation report, and then looking at how we might email that to somebody. And then you're actually going to do some more interesting things with the actual GIA database that we've written out as well, isn't that right?
Yeah, that's right. So, all right. Well, thanks, Mark, for that intro into the world of validation and attribute management. So next, we're gonna move forward and look at some writing features in. Whoops, I got the wrong one there. Writing features in a new way. A skill testing question though first, Mark. What's been around since 2011 that needed a friend? And it's in FME.
Whoa. You put me on the spot.
I did.
You said you weren't going to do that.
No. This is the feature reader. So the feature reader apparently has been around since 2011, which I was surprised about because I had a conversation yesterday with somebody. So anyways, what we're going to introduce here today is the FeatureWriter. For anybody who's watched some of the earlier webinars this year would have already maybe seen some of this. But it's really just the traditional way where we often wrote our data out to a writer, a feature type that it ended the translation, and when it was all done, there was not much you could do with it. And so with the feature writer, now we have the ability to be able to do some post-processing fun stuff after the fact. And there's a lot of, we'll go through a few of the examples of things that we have thought of so far, but this is a game changer. The ability to be able to write data in the middle of our workflows in this way to all our formats, basically, and then be able to do something towards the end of that. So,
and even more exciting, pairing it with our feature writer, where we can read data in the middle of the workflow.
Yes, that's right.
So
yeah.
I think you've got something exciting for us on that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. All right. So what do we got here? The feature writer, like we were speaking about, it basically allows us to write the data in the middle of the workflow, and again, creating endless possibilities of the ways we write our data. You're no longer tied to where the writer ends. The feature writer creates a summary of what happened while it was doing that writing, so you're going to see things in the coming slides there on that. But basically, it reports this out at the end of the writer. Unlike in the past, where you didn't have that ability with the traditional writer. And yes, we did have the shutdown scripts, Python and TCL, that you could do some post-processing with. Maybe push it to a workspace runner, in another workspace. You could have a couple of different workspaces that one workspace did something and then another workspace did some post-processing for you. Sure, that's some of the things you could be doing. But with the feature writer, it's simplifying. It's pulling everything back into that canvas from the shutdown scripts and simplifying from maybe one or two more workspaces down to one workspace. Not everybody is capable of writing Python or TCL. I know I dabble in the Python, and I'm very dangerous with it. Dave Kapanis here at the office is fantastic for helping me there. And it's just a way for us to say no to code. We can stick with the transformers inside of FME. So again, I'm going to say it. It's a game changer, and I think we're just kind of learning some of the new ways we can do things with the feature writer. And maybe I don't know, maybe I'm stretching this. This is the second time we've said something like this. Maybe we're going to see some of these writers as we know maybe disappear, and the feature writer will be the norm. I don't know.
Well, we would hope the feature writer might become the norm. I don't know whether the old ones will disappear.
Yeah. Okay, so here's to look at some of the transformer, and as you can see, we have that summary output port going out. So the feature writer does its business. It writes down the data wherever that format might be. Could be a database, could be a flat file, and then you get the summary feature coming out of the end of it. At the moment, this reports the feature name, the number of features, the features written per feature type, and the data set. So the data set would be the path to the, say, a zipped up file or a shape file location or something like that. So some easy wins are the ability to be able to take the data set and email it as an attachment, and being able to copy the data from one location to another, maybe a Dropbox folder or an FTP site even. So those are a couple of the very easy wins we have. And then the automation workflows. So some of the other things we could maybe be done is the quality checking that we could do after the fact. So the ability to be able to run these data checks right in the same workspace, kick off something else that goes and does some extra data checking on the data that you just finished writing. So think of that. Now we just laid this down, and in the same workspace we can do some more transformer, pull in that data again, maybe with a feature reader, do some analysis on it in a different way, even after we've written it. Sometimes we have, well, I'll get to it in a point. I don't want to steal my thunder too much, but anyways, the database is another way, excuse me, where you've written a bunch of features to the database. FME is reporting certain features, but maybe there's some stuff that goes on in the database that maybe triggers fire or other procedures are called, and now we want to do some more post-processing inside that database. So that's another thing that we could do here. All right, and kicking off like those stored procedures is a very interesting one inside the database after the fact, because a lot of the database formats around geometry storage have their own built-in geometry validation, and that's a very powerful thing or process to be able to kick off at run as you've just written the data and ensure that your data is valid right then and there. So. Okay, so, and here's, Mark and I got talking the other day about how the feature reader and the feature writer can really work in concert and kind of do some cool stuff that was not so trivial before. And for the instance, the database workflows is the key one that comes to my mind when I look at these two, the reader and the writer in this case, where you can do some dropping the constraints, read some data, load that data, transform that data in the way you want, and then write it out to your data with a database, with a feature writer. And then after the fact, do some enabling of those constraints again, validating, like, you know, processing the any of the indexes that you might have had to disable in the first place or drop, or maybe rebuild your spatial indexes. So pretty cool stuff that we can do there with that.
Yeah, so I think this does illustrate the big change that these feature readers and writers do for us, so that they allow you to do something before you start reading the data in your workflow, and then they allow you to do something after you've written your data in the workflow. In this case, it's a really good example of sort of database handling. I think Steve's got another one about sending data backwards and forwards and so on. So a wide range of uses for this new sort of paradigm for reading and writing data in FME.
Yeah. All right, so let's take a look at the demo here we've got. So basically, I've got, I'm just going to zoom in on here, but I've got the same workspace that Mark had, and you know, he's got his traditional readers in here on the left-hand side, and everything's pretty much the same here. But what we've done, if we zoom in on this bookmark, zoom in the bookmark, we've disabled all of these traditional writers in here, and we're actually going out to a feature writer. So instead of having these all on the canvas, now we have this. And you can see here we've got some fun stuff that's happening after the fact. So yeah, we've got that data set name coming out. I'm grabbing that, replacing a string in it to make it formatted, and this new Dropbox connector is taking that data set and actually pushing it up to a Dropbox folder. So that's a really cool, neat thing we can do with that. And then further, where Mark was writing out his validation report to a data set that we have here, now we've added in this feature writer where we can actually write out that data. We've got some AttributeManager here, and then formatting that into an email that we can send out right at the same time we're running this workspace. So that's pretty cool, and that's kind of a couple of little examples of things we can do after we're writing right in the canvas, and not have to involve things like Python or TCL with the shutdown scripts.
Mm-hmm. So maybe we can delete that what the old stuff that we've got in there.
Yeah, let's go
see what this workspace would look like.
Whoops, I didn't do that properly. So we'll do this a second time. And delete. And we're going to remove that writer that we had in there. So poof, it's gone out of the navigator pane. So that's what that new workspace would look like. So we still have our 3 feature types here that we were writing originally. So that's really, really neat. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to run that workspace. I've got a few things queued up, but this is my Dropbox folder. This is where I'm going to, well, we'll just run this workspace now, but we've got our sample data over here, and we'll just run that. And we should get some data appearing here in a few minutes. This will take a...
While that's running, maybe let's have a look at what's inside the feature writer so people can see how
that's a really good idea, just to open up that and see that we have basically everything in here that we would have had on a normal writing out here. Yeah. So the ability to be able to select your format up here and where that destination data set's going to go. You have the ability for your dynamic schema control. Again, the user attributes, all the same as in the traditional writer, where we can have automatic and manual and dynamic. Format parameters, if necessary, are over there. And then down at the bottom here, we have these summary attributes. You can change the names of what's coming out of there, but that's what we have them by default called. And so over here we have feature types. You can add additional feature types to the data set where you might be wanting to write out. So
yeah, that's so it's just writer and feature types all compressed into one tool.
Yeah. So we're hoping that this is a really nice thing that brings that writing ability together into that feature writer. And okay, so that's finished. And look at that, we've got our file up, and Steve did not open up his inbox, but we're going to go check on our email and see that we have a new message in there hopefully this morning. And there it is, right there. So that's a quick little example on how we can do some post-processing stuff, Dropbox, FTP site, or an email in this case.
So I noticed in your Dropbox that we don't have a great big file geodatabase directory. We've got a zip file. How do we create that?
Oh, well, let's go look at the feature writer here. And the dataset name is missing in here. So
that's a parameter we set somewhere.
Yeah, so we got to go look for that parameter over here. And this is the dataset right there. Yeah. Let's look at the definition of that. So in here, what we've done is I'll expand this out here. We're writing out to a geodatabase, but what we've done, we actually said write a zip file, and inside of it write the geodatabase file. So that's a really nifty way. Thanks for bringing that up, Mark. So that's a really nifty way how we can create these zip files on the fly. It's really helpful with shapefiles and that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So quite nice feature there. Yeah. Well, that's good. Okay, so I guess we're back to here now. So next we're going to talk a little bit about automation. And that's where we're going to show you a little bit about FME Server and how we can bring FME Server into this picture and automate some of these workspaces that we've been working on in desktop. So with FME Server, we've got just a quick look at what we've got here. We've got the ability to be able to automate things, these workspaces, push them up, schedule them, that sort of thing. The FME engine is the same engine. It's the workhorse. That's the same one that was running for desktop. It's on server. Server is a scalable platform and allows you to deliver your data, maybe allow people to download that data, access data real time, be able to go into an interface and get at the data the way they want. And you can all do all of that on the scalable platform known as FME Server. So let's, some things we can we can let server do the work here. We have abilities for FME Server to watch directories with the directory watcher. We got the Dropbox caller, the FTP watcher, S3 bucket watcher to be able to drag and drop things onto the web UI to be able to process that data, or even receiving emails with attachments like CAD files in this case. So if we just switch over to FME Server, what I want to show you here once I log in is a directory watcher. So in the original workspace that Mark created, we were just reading a file from a local location. But on FME Server, what we've done is we've created this new directory watcher, publisher, that is monitoring a local folder on the system here. And that's all that's going to do. When a file gets created inside that folder, it's going to run a workspace. And that workspace has been published to FME Server. And I'll bring it up here. Now, I'll just switch to that other workspace. Oops. And here it is. So this is the same workspace that Mark had with a few tweaks to it. Like the last one, we get the Dropbox color over here. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. But what I've done over here is I've provided a way to read. Come on. It's not my Mac. Basically, what I've done here is I've pulled in a JSON feature type that is able to read the notification that comes from that publisher. So when that publisher gets triggered, it sends me, it sends FME server a notification via JSON to a topic, and that topic hits this workspace. So this workspace is able to read JSON because I've given it a JSON reader. But what's really cool about this, if I zoom in a bit more, is I've essentially taken that JSON feature and I'm reading it. I'm sending it to a feature reader, and you can guess what I'm sending it to the feature reader. I'm sending the incoming data set location to the feature reader, and voila, now I can go back out and do all that same stuff I was doing with this this data set. Now you can imagine it's a little more difficult to get a notification sent in, have that data set passed to the traditional readers, and that's why the feature readers are a really cool thing here too as well.
Open the properties of that again, Steve.
Yep.
So this is just basically our AutoCAD reader bundled up into a single entity now, and it's got it's going to read all the feature types that we've defined in there. So that's very cool. So you're using that JSON message as the trigger to start the read of the AutoCAD file and passing in the name of the AutoCAD file.
Yeah, that's right. That directory watch path is coming right from the JSON reader. It's coming right from the notification, actually. When it hits the topic, we're going to see that path right in there. So if we were to view that JSON, we would see that in the logger. If I was a, whoops, I don't want to do that. Let's do big Control Z. All right, so again, we've got these feature types here, and we can actually delete those. We don't need them. Oops, maybe we do. Oh, I'm still referencing them. Yeah, we'll leave those in there. There's still some references going on there. So essentially, these need to be tweaked a little bit to deal with that, and I didn't do that. So everything else is the same in this workspace. Again, we had those the writer there still, but everything else is going to be the same in this workspace. So now we're going to go, instead of running it through desktop, we're going to run it right from basically taking our source data and dropping it into his input folder. And just to prove that this really works, we're going to come up here, we're going to delete this, and then we'll drop that down into our input. So this is where the directory watcher is watching this folder.
And so it's scanning that every, whatever, few seconds or something.
That's right. And if I log into another window, the notification would have already passed through here. So we're just going to go look at the manage and see what jobs we got running. So, yeah, so it's still running there a little bit. And it will complete in a moment, and we will get a file in this location here. And there's the file. The job will finish. And we're happy. We've got our example data back.
And if we had wanted, we could have sent an email to the owner of that data to go and get it.
Well, exactly. And in fact, we did send another email. So there's the other.
Yeah. So we sent an email with the validation report, and we sent the data to one place. But we could have sent an email with both, or done a whole bunch of different interesting things.
We could have tweeted out, "Hey, we're amazing. We just created some new data." So, all right, let's go back to that. So yeah, that's a little show of what we can do on the FME server side to create some pretty neat automation. And you know, in this case, you know, going off-road a little tiny bit, you know, people often get FME server and they create these custom web front ends to kind of do some of this stuff with it. And in the back end, all this automation can be put together now so much more in the canvas as the workbench itself, so it's pretty neat. Okay, so we are on our summary slide. We're doing okay for time.
I think
and
we are doing okay for time.
And how are the questions looking?
We've got Q&A coming up. I think we've got a poll coming up.
Yeah,
in a second.
yeah, it's a little bit further on.
Yeah, so take advantage of these new transformation tools. For new users, they're just tools that you can use. For existing users in FME, we would encourage you to explore them. There's 3 major transformers there, and one that's been around for a long time, but we would encourage you to use that. So that's the FeatureWriter that Steve mentioned, has been there for a long time, but now paired up with the FeatureWriter, that really can change the way that you build these workflows based on that little pseudo kind of workflow that Steve had shown up earlier on. Yep.
Oh, technical difficulty, there we go.
Okay, so there are a few articles and stuff up there about these, so if you want to explore them a little bit more, there's a couple of knowledge base articles on AttributeManager and the AttributeValidator, a couple of blog posts on those as well. I'll also mention that I think I did already, but remind you that at the end of this PowerPoint slide, I've added a bunch of references that you can look up, so when you see these slides online, then you'll be able to do that. So free FME training. Always remember that we do offer online instructor-led training. There's one going on today, I guess, so you missed that one. So that was yesterday and today. That's in the European time zone.
Oh, that's what it is. So it's already done then.
It's they've probably already done.
And it's free. The training sessions we put on are free, right?
That's
so
right.
If you got some 4 hours, two mornings in the week, come join us.
Yeah, FME server coming up next week. So if you want to learn more about that automation, go for that. You don't have to be an FME customer, a Safe Software customer, to join our training session. So it's a really good way to evaluate and explore the product without making a commitment. And then for existing FME users, there's an FME Desktop Advanced training coming on later in the month. So that's some more advanced topics there. So go to our website and look for the training page, and you can see what's in that advanced training session coming up. And then sometime following that, I'm sure there'll be an introductory desktop training session. Yeah. Don't forget our FME World Tour. So Steve and I are traveling together this year. We're going down to the southeast of the U.S. Based on somebody's website. I've found out that that's regions 4 and 6 of the U.S.
Oh.
So we're going to knock it for 6.
Okay.
So prizes for anybody who knows what sport knocking for 6 is associated with.
There you go.
You can chat that into our chat or questions there. Yeah. So yeah, we've got 4 teams going out this year. The tour starts in Vancouver here, I think April 8th, and then the following week we're all heading out to various cities. I think, where are we going, Steve?
We're going to be in St. Louis, Oklahoma City, Houston, Atlanta, and Austin. So some lucky peeps there, they're going to get to see us in action. And we're going to be joined by Natalie, so we got to do a shout out for her too. She's going to be joining us.
Yeah.
So.
And then following that week, there will be a whole raft of sessions around the world this year. So it's usually been focused in Europe, but we've got Aaron going to Australia, Dean going to Brazil, and Aaron is also going to do 2 in India with our partner there. So if you're listening from India, make sure you join us at one of those 2 World Tour events.
And spread the word, yeah.
And spread the word.
Yeah, there's good food at these events, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. And, okay, so we've got a poll question here. Which of today's tasks do you see yourself performing on your GIS data? So we'll get that launched and see what we get out of that. So.
Yep, and so, yeah, we'd like to hear from you. These are new tools in FME, new ways of building your workflows. So Let us know what you think about them. Hit us up on support or on our community website or our ideas page on our Knowledge Center, and have a look at that. So looks like we've had quite a few votes in there, so I'm going to close the poll, and then we can have a quick look at what the results are there. So big vote for the Attribute Manager. Well, that's great. Thanks a lot. Attribute validation. Big votes for them all, actually.
Are we sharing? Are we sharing that? I got a little spinning circle on my screen, which may not be good.
I don't know how we share these things. Stephanie can help us out there anyway. But yeah, so execute post-processing tasks with the FeatureWriter. That's getting quite a lot of interest as well. So yep, that's great. So let us know whether those tools are working for you, or as you build those new workflows, whether there are some gaps in there. Okay, we've got a few moments for some questions, and there was one actually up here, Steve, that I thought was right up your alley. From Keith, and I think if you go back to that slide of the pseudo workflow that we built, and Keith asks, with the FeatureWriter, can you write to a primary key table and then write to a foreign key table using the keys of the values written to the primary key table?
So we want to go back to
yeah, a little bit. One of these ones here. Yeah, that one there. So I think the answer is that we haven't actually done that yet. So the answer is can you sort of sequence the writes so that you write to probably a child table, and then write, if there's triggers based on that, to the primary table or something like that. And of course, there's no reason you can't have more than one FeatureWriter in your workflow.
Absolutely.
So that would be a way to sequence the features, which is kind of hard to do in FME.
Yep.
And so we haven't done too much experimentation there, but Steve and I have talked about this a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, we want to try to give it a go, and I mean, if anybody's got a use case that wants to kind of try to play with it, or work with us to work through the scenario, or learn how FME interacts with those tables, I think we can definitely do something a lot better today than we could last year. So for sure, that's a big one. We have this notion. Some of the databases support like a session. Or a transaction, I should probably more correctly say. And we're still doing some work around that, being able to open a transaction of sorts of, and just doing some inserts into different tables. Because right now the way FME behaves, a lot of times we create different sessions to the database. And that could still be a problem if you're not committing data. And obviously when we're writing data to a database, the big thing about a database is if we fail partway through a transaction or a session to load data, we have the ability to roll back. But if you're committing data along the way, which is what traditionally you kind of had to do in some cases with FME, there were ways to slice that differently, you had no ability to roll back a bad transaction. So we're trying to come up with some really clear messaging, knowledge-based articles that will showcase how we envision that happening. So that'd be really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, on our sports question there, hitting for a 6. So that does come from cricket. We have 4 or 5 people of you hit up there. Somebody did make a guess at curling. The only thing I can think of there is if somebody knocks themselves out with a stone by accident or something. But so yeah. Not hitting for a 6 was curling. Somebody asked about geoprocessing validation, so I did forget to mention that the AttributeValidator is a very good cousin of the geometry validator.
Mm-hmm.
So there, if you're doing some validation of your workflows, explore the geometry validator as well, and that will really try and guarantee some nice, clean data for you. Well, I think that's our time is up for the day. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. As I mentioned, everybody who's attended will get a follow-up email which will give you the links to these PowerPoint slides, and Steve and I will also post up there the example workflows that we've been working with, and then you can experiment with those. And if you don't already have FME Server, you could sign up for an FME Cloud account.
That's
and
right.
Experiment with that workflow that Steve, you could try posting that up and do the notification stuff. Actually, you would have to change the writer because Cloud doesn't support geodatabase, but you would have to switch that to the geodatabase API writer, and that would fudge you through that one.
Yeah, that's because FME Cloud's based on Linux.
Yes. So that's good. So with that, it's goodbye for me.
And goodbye for me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day or morning, evening, whatever it might be for you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody.